Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis, a place where we discuss all the important stories from the Hindu newspaper from both the prelims and the mains examination point of view. These are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. Today's newspaper was filled up with polity-related topics specifically. For example, the first article that we have here is about the power of the governor to give assent to the bill, the recent Supreme Court judgment in that regard, with respect to the governors, especially in the states of Punjab, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. The second article is about the elections that recently took place in Chhattisgarh. The author here is specifically referring to the elections in the Maoist affected areas, especially the Bastar region, where there was an extremely low turnout. The author here is pointing out towards not great implementation of the government laws such as the PISA Act, because of which the people living in the area may have preferred to trust the Maoist leaders more than the government. The third article is again from Indian polity. It's about the anti-defection law. Here the author points out towards the problems in the anti-defection law, the loopholes that exist, and what do we need to do to plug them in. Then the next article is about the COP28 and the participation of big cities around the world, mainly the capital cities and other commercial capitals. What role do they have to play in our fight against climate change? Then from the prelims exam point of view, the Supreme Court has said that the ED, Enforcement Directorate, should give a copy of the grounds of detention against any person within 24 hours. Basically, there was a question mark over when the ED comes for an arrest. That is the Enforcement Directorate under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. They don't tell the person why are they arresting him or her. So there was a challenge in the Supreme Court that this goes against our fundamental right. We need to know why are we being arrested. The Supreme Court has now said that ED does not have to tell you the grounds of detention at the time of arrest. They can tell this to you within the first 24 hours. And then in the end, India's first winter Arctic expedition is now about to begin. We'll be discussing what is it that the government of India is trying to achieve with this expedition. Before we begin, a very important announcement. For tomorrow, the CNA, that is this session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis, will be at 12 p.m. Just tomorrow. Please do remember, tomorrow you have to join us at 12 p.m. and not at 10 a.m. Due to some technical issues, we'll be going live at 12 p.m. tomorrow. So do join us then. Let's begin with the very first article. The first article is about the role of the governor in giving assent to the bill. Now, this is something that we have discussed multiple times in the past few weeks because of the fact that it has been in the news with respect to multiple states. Now, governor's office is something that is not far away from controversy, especially when you talk about the governors who are in the states which are not ruled by the party that is ruling at the center government level. For example, especially in the states of Punjab, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, we have seen these state governments continuously giving statements against their own governor. In fact, the situation has become so odd that these states have gone to Supreme Court against their own governor. The allegation by these states is that their governor does not pass the bill that has been passed by the legislature. The governor does not give the assent. The governor keeps the bill with himself for a long time, essentially using pocket veto, which the state legislature says and the state government says is against the democratic principles. In question here is article number 200 of the Indian Constitution that talks about the power of the governor to give assent to the bills passed by the state legislature. Now first let me tell you what exactly has happened, what is it that the Supreme Court has said, and then we'll come to what this article says. So essentially the Supreme Court recently gave a judgment where they said when the governor gets a bill passed by the state legislature, and let's assume the governor does not want to give his assent. The governor thinks that there's something wrong. As per the Supreme Court, this does not give the right to the governor to keep the bill with himself. No. Even if the governor does not like something in the bill, the governor must send the bill back to the legislature once and make it clear which is a provision where he has a problem. Tell the legislature that I have a problem in this case specifically. Ask the legislator to change that. once the legislator changes that, the governor in the second instance must give assent to the bill. That is what the Supreme Court has said. So essentially, if I talk to you in terms of veto power, essentially what the Supreme Court said was that the governor should not use pocket veto. Rather, if they have a problem with the bill, the governor should use suspensive veto. That means the governor should send the bill back to the legislature, clarify to the legislature what are the pointers where he has an issue, ask them to be changed. If the legislature changes that, or even if the legislature does not make a change, in either of the case, in the end what should happen is the governor should in the second instance sign the bill, give the assent to the bill. So in other words, the Supreme Court, without taking the name, has said that pocket veto should not be applicable at the level of the governor. Suspensive veto is a way to go. Now, the author here is saying that by doing that, the Supreme Court has given a lot more clarity over what is the role of the governor. Because in the past, we have seen a lot of times that the governors act on the advice of the central government rather in the interest of the state. And the central government does not want a specific bill to be passed. The governors use this tactic of not giving the assent and keeping the bill with themselves for a long period of time. Now, earlier means before the Supreme Court judgment, it was believed that when the assent is withheld means pocket veto. It meant that the bill will die a natural death. Earlier also there was an option to send the bill back, but the governors usually did not use that. But now the Supreme Court has knocked this option out. The Supreme Court has said that you cannot just withhold the assent. However, that does not mean that the governor has no other option now. You know that the governor still has one more option given in Article 201, that is sending the bill for the recommendation of the President of India. This also is something that the governors do on a large scale now. When the governors get the bill and they don't want to give assent, what they do is they just send the bill to the President of India, because here they can use their own discretion. And now it becomes a matter between the President of India, means the central government, and the state government. The governor kind of recuses himself that, see, I don't have to do anything with this case now. This matter has now gone into the hands of the President. He will act on the advice of the Central Council of Ministers. Now I have nothing to do with this. That option is still open with the governor. Now, we have discussed this earlier. What are the bills that the governor sends to the President of India? There is one category where the governor must send the bill to the President. Which is that one category? When the bill endangers the position of the State High Court. If the position of the State High Court is endangered by any law, such a law must compulsorily be signed by the President only and not the governor. Now the interesting part is, you would have read this in books also, that this is a compulsory situation. But apart from that, there are other situations also where the governor may or may not send the bill to the President. Like, if the governor thinks a bill is in the national interest, if the governor thinks it is something of national importance, if the governor thinks it goes against the directed principles, if the governor thinks that it talks about compulsory acquisition of property, all those circumstances are where the governor can use his own discretion, whether he wants to send the bill to the President or not. The interesting part is, Constitution does not give any other category of bills apart from the State High Court criteria. The Constitution does not tell the governor what are the other criteria or the situations in which you must send the bill to the President. In other cases, the governor uses his assent, uses his discretion. This is again where the governors misuse this provision. In fact, see what happened recently. Recently what happened was, when the Supreme Court said that the governor should not keep the bill with themselves. What happened in case of Kerala? The Kerala governor had 9 bills. He had 9 bills pending for a long time, about 2 years. He had just not given the assent. When the Supreme Court said that you should not do that, the governor signed on one bill, gave assent to one bill, and all the remaining others he sent it to the President. that okay, now let the president decide, I won't decide. So this is again a loophole that the governors use. Pocket veto was not the only loophole that they used to kill the bill. They also used this loophole to send the bill to the President of India. Now, a question that the author is asking, can a governor reserve the bill for the President's consideration on his own discretion? Means, can the governor send any bill to the President? Because if that is the case, then it will be a very lengthy process. Then you are essentially paralyzing the state government. Because in that case, the governor can send every bill to the president and the state legislature will just not be able to function. There is no clarity in the constitution. As I said, the constitution only says if a bill is trying to endanger the power of the state high court, that bill must be sent to the president. In other cases, there is no clarity. However, the author says that there are a few examples where the governor must send certain matters for the president's consideration. For example, when it talks about ordinance making power, the constitution says if the governor has to promulgate an ordinance on such matters where if a bill was to be passed, a normal law was to be passed, it required the president's assent, then the ordinance would also require the assent of the president. Let me repeat that. In simple terms, if a certain law in normal conditions to be passed would have required the president's assent, the governor, while passing ordinance on such matters, should also take president's recommendation, should also take president's assent. So yes, there are some instances of the governor reserving certain matters for the president. There is one more example, that is when it comes to the concurrent list. Now, as you know, concurrent list is the list of those subjects in the 7th schedule where both the center and the state governments can make laws. Now, if the state government is passing a law on a concurrent list matter and that law, either completely or a part of that law, is against an existing central government law. Please remember this. If the state legislature is passing a bill on a matter given in the concurrent list and that law is either partially or completely against a law already passed by the central government, then also the governor must send it to the president and the president has to give the assent for that law to be valid. However, the constitution does not say that the governor must send those bills also to the president which are made on the state list matters. This provision is only for sending those bills which are made on the matters of the concurrent list. So all in all, there is not much clarity in the constitution when it comes to which bills specifically have to be sent from the governor to the president's office, except the High Court provision. This is why the governor, by using his own discretion, by saying that I will decide which bills to send, which bill not to send, the governor again uses this loophole to delay the law-making process at the state level. Now the reality is, even our constitution makers knew that the office of the governor will be something that will come under a lot of scrutiny in the coming years. That's why even in the Constituent Assembly, there were multiple debates about the role of the governor. What should the governor do? How should the governor behave, etc. For example, in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said that when the Constitution says, except in so far as he is under the Constitution. So basically, just to remind you, look at Article 163. Article 163 says that the governor will have discretionary power in certain instances. What are those instances? Instances where he does not have to take advice of Council of Ministers. He can carry out his functions so far as he is under the Constitution required exercise of his functions or on his own discretion. So basically, let me tell you what this phrase actually means. The President of India has not been given any discretionary powers in the Constitution, but the governor has been. There are certain matters on which the governor can act on his own discretion. For example, you would have read there are certain states like the 6 scheduled states in the Constitution of India. When there are mineral exploration done in those states, how much money from that should be given to those states or should be given to those districts as royalty. The governor can also act on his own discretion while deciding whether to send a report to the president to suggest imposing president's rule or not. So governor does have certain instances where he can act on his own discretion. But as per Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, those are very, very, very limited instances. The governor must not be very strong in his own discretion. Only very few limited matters, as per Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, should be within the discretionary powers of the governor. In fact, if you go even back, the Government of India Act 1935, it contained the word in his discretion while referring to the governor's grant of assent to the bill. But that phrase was removed in the Constitution. So the Constitution of India, the Constitution makers were very careful in not using these words that the governor can act on his own discretion while giving assent to the bill. That again shows that the Constitution makers had no intention of giving governor the discretionary power when it comes to signing of the bills. Thus, the governor must not delay these bills just by sending them to the president time and time again. These are very important words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He said in the Constituent Assembly, the governor under the Constitution has no functions which he can discharge by himself. No functions at all. This article certainly, it should be borne in mind, does not confer upon the governor the power to overrule the ministry or any particular matter. Even under this article, the governor is bound to accept the advice of the ministry, referring to article number 163 of the Indian Constitution. So again, this is something that you can quote in the mains exam, that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar specifically was clear that the governor does not have any discretionary functions which he can discharge by himself. Now on this matter, with regards to the governor, there are some very important judgments of the Supreme Court in the past which you must know. For example, 1962, Purushothaman Nambudiri versus the state of Kerala. The Supreme Court had said there is no time limit given under Article 200 for the governor to give his assent, meaning that the constitution makers did not intend for a bill pending of the assent to be lapsed at the dissolution of the House. So basically the Supreme Court said that there is no time limit for the governor to sign the bill. That means the bills will not be lapsed just because the House session has ended. Please remember, this is something that happens in the US. In the US Parliament or the US Congress as you call them, when a session comes to an end, whatever pending bills there are, they will all be lapsed. It doesn't happen in India. Shamsher Singh case 1974, Supreme Court said with respect to the second provision of Article 200, that is the governor's power to reserve the bill for the president, the governor can exercise the discretion independent of the Council of Ministers. The Supreme Court itself earlier had said that the governor can actually send the bill to the president on his own discretion. More recently, 2016, in Raman Revibia case, the Supreme Court reiterated that the governor can exercise discretion only with regards to whether a bill has to be reserved for the president's recommendation or not. Now, the Supreme Court, as you can see in the past, has been supportive of the governor sending the bill to the president on their own discretion. There has also been a lot of talk about whether or not there should be a time limit for the governor to give assent to the bill. For example, the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, which was set up in the year 2000, suggested there should be a time limit of about 6 months to the governor to decide on the bill. And if the bill is sent to the president, even then there should be a time limit of 3 months. This was just a suggestion by the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution. This is also called as a Venkatachalya Commission. It is the same thing. But this has not been implemented so far, as you all know. This was about the first topic, the governor's power to give assent to the bill. The second topic that we have here is about grassroots democracy in those areas where Naxalism still exists as a threat. The author here is saying that the recent polls in Chhattisgarh, especially in the Naxal affected areas, again highlight the fact that it is the Naxal leaders, that rule the roost in those areas and not really the government. Why? Because if you see the voting percentage, the number of people who are coming out to vote, that means that the people trust the Naxal leaders more than they trust the government and the government representative. The single biggest reason as per the author here is non-implementation of laws such as PESA. PESA, as you know, is the Panchayat Extension to Schedule Areas Act 1996. Panchayat Extension to Schedule Areas Act of 1996. Now, in simple terms, the law of Panchayat, the 73rd Amendment Act, does not apply to schedule areas. For those schedule areas of the 5th schedule, this is the law that has been created. It's similar to the law of Panchayat in the 73rd Amendment Act, just that it gives more power to the Gram Sabha more specifically. As per the author, if you look at the tribal population in Chhattisgarh, they make up close to 1/3 of the voting share. Now, Chhattisgarh is one state which has still been relatively exposed to Naxalism, although there has been a lot of improvement by the action of the armed forces, by the action of the paramilitary forces, but still there are a lot of areas still under effects of Naxal leaders. In fact, in the Maoist affected areas such as Bijapur, Konta, the voter percentage this time around was 3 to 4%. Now, for those of you who don't know, whenever there are elections that happen in these areas, the Naxal leaders convince the local population not to go out and vote. Why? Because they think that this is the way in which they can boycott the government and the government representatives. This is the way in which they can tell the government that, see, you don't control this area is under our control, the people are listening to us, whatever we say, the people will do that. This is why you will see a very, very low percentage vote out in these kind of areas. Now, what are the problems in these areas? The politicians basically in their election rallies, they try to prove that the issue in this area is of forced religious conversion. They say that the tribals are being converted to other religions. That is the biggest problem here. But the reality is, if you talk to the local population, they are not really concerned about these religious conversions as such. For them, tribals want the rights that are guaranteed by the constitution to be given to them. In the past, many politicians thought that the tribals are not aware of any law. The tribals are not aware of constitution, so they don't know what they deserve. They don't know what is the guarantee given to them. But now with increasing awareness, we see more and more tribals demanding what is their right as per the constitution, demanding the welfare that they deserve as per the laws. All these awareness and assertions have led to a lot of movements which are against the government in states such as Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. For example, you might have heard of this movement. There's a very famous tribal movement in Jharkhand called Pathalgadi movement. Now, I'm not sure if you have heard of this. If you have not heard of this, let me first tell you what is this movement. I'll just come back. This is something called the Pathalgadi rebellion. So what exactly is this? So what happens is, tribals outside their village, they put a big stone, something like this. Something like this. So what they do is they put this big stone and they say that after this the rule of the government does not exist. So what they say is that after this the rule of the government would not exist. After this it is us who will decide how the law and order in this area would be. This is usually concentrated in the 4 districts of Khunti, Gumla, Simdega and West Singhbhum. This is where entry of any other institution connected to the state is prohibited. They don't allow anyone coming in from the government. They say that we are the ones who will now control what happens in this area. It's a custom that was started by the Munda tribal rebellion. They place these huge stones that mark the death of a person. This is a movement that honors the customs of their own community. So they say that we will not allow any of the government laws and rules to exist in this area because we don't believe in you. We will run our own laws over here. Now coming back to this article, the author here points out that probably the biggest reason why a lot of tribals in the rural areas are still more attracted to Naxal leaders than the government is because of non-implementation or shortcomings in the PESA Act. Now, as I said, PESA stands for Panchayat Extension to Schedule Areas. This is a law similar to that of Panchayat. It was implemented in the schedule areas, the 5th schedule areas, with certain changes. I'll tell you a few pointers which are different as compared to normal Panchayat law. First, the biggest difference is the enhanced power given to Gram Sabha. Now, Gram Sabha, as you know, is the assembly of all the voters in the village. So, in the village, everyone above 18 years of age whose name is registered in the voter list, all of them together are called the Gram Sabha. Now, Gram Sabha in these areas has been given a lot of power to decide how the local land will be used, to decide if some outside interference will be allowed or not, to decide a lot of local customs and traditions. These kind of powers are not given to Gram Sabha in normal Panchayat areas. This is done so that the local custom, local rituals can be preserved and there is no interference from outside. That's the purpose of the PESA Act. It is also done so that no outside acquisition of land can happen. For example, under these areas, the Gram Sabha decides if the local land can be sold to someone else or not. Also, because these are tribal dominated areas, in these panchayats, the tribals have a reservation, scheduled tribe rather, have a reservation of at least 50%, which is more than the reservation that we see in usual panchayats. This is what the PESA Act was. Now, it was introduced with good intentions, as all the laws are, but the problem is, despite all these intentions, we have not seen the PESA Act making the kind of impact that we have hoped. There is not enough power that has been devolved and given to the Gram Sabhas. A lot of Gram Sabhas have become corrupt as well, because they have also realized, since they have the power to decide how the land will be used, if land can be transferred or not, this has given them a free hand over deciding all the important matters in this village. Then the third article, again from Indian Polity, that is about the anti-defection law. Now, there is nothing that has happened recently on the lines of the anti-defection law, but this has become a very constant and it's an occurrence that keeps on happening time and time again in our politics, especially nearby the elections. I'm sure all of you are aware of the anti-defection law. If you are not, let me just give you a very brief background. Anti-defection law is written in the 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution. It simply says that if you won the election from ticket of a specific party and you became MP or MLA, then if you resign from the party, number one, you will be disqualified from your membership of the parliament or the legislature. Secondly, if you vote against the party's directions, if the party asks you to vote yes, but you voted no, then also you will be disqualified. Thirdly, if you are an independent member, you won as an independent candidate, then you join any political party, then also you will be disqualified. And fourth, if you are a nominated member of parliament, as we have nominated members of parliament in the Rajya Sabha, 12 of them, you can join a political party within the first 6 months. After that, if you join a political party, you will be disqualified. These are the 4 provisions of the anti-defection law. Now, the intention behind the anti-defection law, as you know, was to ensure stability in the government. Because for far too long, we had politicians changing their political parties without any consequences. If they were given any rewards, any cash from other party, they used to change the party and the entire government used to fall down. So in the 1980s, when it became a very big issue, anti-defection law was introduced to bring more stability. However, as per the author, there are a lot of loopholes in the anti-defection law. Because of those loopholes, this law has not been able to work properly. Now, what are the loopholes that the examiners, that the authors are talking about? One big loophole, one exemption that we have seen in anti-defection law is the exemption of merger. Now, what is the exemption of merger? So basically, the law says if 2/3 members of your party or more resign together to merge with another party, then they will not be disqualified. For example, if there are 60 members of parliament of a party, out of these 60, 40 or more, all of them together resign to join the other party, to merge with the other party, then they will be saved, they will not be disqualified. That is why you will see if any party wants to attract MPs or MLAs from the other party, they don't just attract 1 or 2. they aim for what you call as mass defection. Mass defection, that is at least 2/3 of the strength of the party should come out so that they can form their own government and they will not be disqualified. Now this is an exception given here. However, one other rule that is misused is the rule of split. That is the rule of split. So basically, the rule of split or a split has not been recognized under the anti-defection law. What does it mean? Let's try and understand. Let's assume again there's a political party with 60 members of parliament. Okay. Out of these, let's assume 20 members of parliament come out. Now, if these 20 members of parliament come out, you would say that they should be disqualified under anti-defection law, but no. What these 20 MPs say, they say that we are not coming out of the party. They say that we are the original party. They say that if this is party, let's say called ABC, the 20 MPs will come out and they will say we are the real ABC party. We are the real ABC, we have split. Now this does not have any penalty under anti-defection law, because anti-defection law does not recognize or does not punish any splitting. This is a law that is being misused by the politicians, that some of them, a few of them, just split from the party. They say that we have not resigned, it's our party only, just that they are not following our principles, so we are the real party. That's what happened, for example, in case of Shiv Sena. In case of Shiv Sena in Maharashtra, the party split and the new group said that we are the new party, not the ones that are remaining in the party. So in that case, when there is a split, there is no specific punishment. And later on what happens, these members of parliament that split, they say we are the real ABC, they will then join hands with some other party. That's a big loophole. Let's take this example. Let's say in a state, XYZ party needed 20 seats to form the government. They were falling short of 20 seats from the majority. So what they did was, they contacted these 20 MPs from the other party, ABC. They said, come to our side, but don't resign. If you resign from your party, you will be disqualified, so will not be any use of us. So what do? You don't resign from the party, you just split from the party. You say that no, we are not a part of that party now, we are the real party. And then you all together come to us. So you can say that 100% of the real party has now joined the other party. So the 2/3 law will not apply to you. So these are the loopholes that the politicians are using. As I always say, a lot of us make a mistake of thinking that, oh, politicians are not educated. Why there is no education criteria for politicians? Irrespective of whatever you think, never think that the politicians are not smart. Politicians can find out so many loopholes that you would not even realize that exist. These are the kind of loopholes that the politicians can find out from time to time. And this is why, despite having the anti-defection law in place, we have seen the governments falling, the governments being made again time and time again. This is why the anti-defection law needs to change. What I explained to you was a finding by Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. They found out exactly the same thing happening here. For example, they have explained this in this paragraph. Elected legislatures separate from the political party that they belong to and say that we have split from the political party, and they make a group of, let's say, 1/3 MLAs. They will not be disqualified. Why? Because split is not recognized by the anti-defection law. The entire group that has been split would now merge with another party. Because they merge in full, they will say 100% of our real party has merged. That is how they save themselves from being disqualified under the anti-defection law. So in short, anti-defection law has not been able to fulfill the mandate that it was created for. Not just this. This is not the only criticism of the anti-defection law. The other big criticism is, it does not allow the members of parliament to speak their own mind. Take this simple example. Let's assume in the Lok Sabha elections, there was a candidate who came to your place who said, vote for me, I will build a big hospital here. He says that government is building new AIIMS, I will make sure this new AIIMS is built in our city, so vote for me. Let's assume you voted for him, his party won, the government was formed. but then his party decides that the hospital aims will not be built in your city, it will be built in some other city. Your member of parliament cannot do anything about that, because your member of parliament has to vote in favor of his party only. Otherwise, anti-defection law will apply to him, he will be disqualified. So whatever promises have been made by members of parliament to their voters cannot be fulfilled if their party does not want. And they can't take anything from this because they have to abide by the party lines. Whatever the party says, they have to say yes. If they don't, they will be disqualified. That becomes a big problem under anti-defection law. Other problem under anti-defection law is the role of the speaker. Because under anti-defection law, whether an MP or MLA has to be disqualified or not, that final decision has to be taken by the speaker. The presiding officer of the house decides whether or not the member of the parliament has to be disqualified. This also becomes controversial because the speakers in many cases don't take a decision. Take the simple example. In today's situation in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha rather, would a Congress member want to shift to the BJP or would a BJP member want to shift to the Congress? Just think of it. In today's scenario or in any scenario, you would want to shift towards the side that you think is stronger. So more chances are that a member from Congress would want to switch to the BJP. Now let's say if a Congress MP has resigned and joined the BJP, the member should be disqualified under the anti-defection law. But who will take the decision of the disqualification? The Lok Sabha speaker only. The Lok Sabha speaker is from which party? BJP only. So would he be willing to take a decision to disqualify a member who has joined his party? Again, these are just allegations, but if you think about it, speaker should not be the deciding authority in such cases because the decision given by the speaker may not be fair because the speaker also at the end of the day belongs to one of the parties, and this is why anti-defection law needs certain changes. I'll give you an example. In the US, they don't have an anti-defection law. So in the US, for example, the members of the parties are free to vote in whatever case that they want. So if Democrats have introduced a bill, a Republican member of parliament can vote yes for that bill. And a Democrat may vote no also for that bill. So just because a party in power in the US has introduced a bill doesn't mean that it will automatically get passed. Like in India, if the BJP introduces a bill today, you know for sure in the Lok Sabha at least it will be passed because they have the majority. In US that is not always the case. So there are pros and cons of the anti-defection law. But yes, there are certain loopholes that need to be plugged in without any doubt. The next article is again about the COP28 with respect to especially for the cities here. Now, the point that the author is making in this article is that if you see, increasingly the world's population is becoming urbanized. More and more people are coming in and staying in the cities. Meaning that if we do not control the emissions in our big cities, we would not be able to make a big change overall in the climate change issue. So the role of big cities and their leaders, city governments, is important in these international conferences. We can't just have the president and the prime ministers coming in. Big cities, their mayors, their local government should also play a big role because without any action being taken by them, we will not have any impact. Now, this brings me to your homework for today. In your homework today, find out and tell me in the comment section, what are the parameters or what are the conditions based on which an area is called an urban area? The question is, how is an area classified as an urban area in India? And don't say, sir, good infrastructure, good buildings, because these are not proper definitions. Proper definition would be based on certain numbers. So when you say if a certain area is an urban area or a rural area, how do you define that? If I take you to a place, open up your eyes and ask you, is this an urban area or a rural area? How will you identify that? What is a proper definition? Do tell me in the comment section. Find out how is it defined. Let's come back. So basically, as per the author, if you look at 1995, 44% of the world's population lived in the cities. Now, it is 55%. By 2050, 68% of our population will live in the cities, meaning that more and more people are migrating from the rural to the urban areas, as a result of which we have cities becoming the center of emissions. For example, today, 75% of our primary energy and 70% of CO2 emissions actually are from the cities only. Thus, an important role has to be played by the city and the city governments if we have to make sure that the emission levels across the world are controlled. Here, the cities of the global south are even more vulnerable. Global south, as I said, means developing and the least developed nations. They are called the global south. So basically, those big cities that exist in developing countries and the least developed countries are even more at a danger. Why? They don't have the kind of infrastructure, they don't have the kind of funds that is required to fight against climate change. See, remember the floods that caused humongous damage in Pakistan just recently? Thousands of people were killed. There were damages in the tunes of billions and billions of dollars in Pakistan just because there was just not enough infrastructure that was able to sustain against all this problem. In fact, in India also, if you look right now, 40% of the urban population just lives in slums. Slums in North India and Delhi, they're also called Jhuggi Jhopdi. Slums are a result of unplanned development. When you have thousands and lakhs of people coming to the cities in search of jobs, and either they don't get a job or they get a job but the pay of the job is not enough to give rent of an adequate place, they have no option but to live in slums. That is how slums come into existence. People living in the slums are not living there by choice. They are living there because there is no other option given to them. No one wants to live in a place where there are hundreds of houses in a compact place with only one or two common washrooms. No one wants to live there as a choice. Please understand this. It's the situation that has forced them to live in that area because they are coming to the cities in search of a better livelihood. But it's just not enough for them to have their own place as well. Now, one of the ways to achieve progress in these areas, as per the author, is to identify the hotspots. Means to create something called climate atlas of the cities. Climate atlas means to basically ensure that rather than thinking of how much emission does India do, think of how much emissions are happening in India city-wise. In which city do we have bigger emissions or stronger emissions? In which city do we have more danger of climate change issues? And focus on those cities. There has to be city-wise plan, city-wise development that can be seen with the help of the climate atlas of these cities. Also, in the next climate change conference, as per the author, there should be representation from big urban cities around the world. For example, it doesn't happen in India, but if you look outside India, in bigger cities like London, Washington, Paris, the mayors have a very, very, very strong power within the city. For example, within London, it is said that the mayor of London is more powerful than even the prime minister within London, because the mayor of London has the entire police of London under him. He is the one who can actually take a lot of action. Similar is the case in case of US cities as well, Paris as well. So in bigger cities around the world, the model usually is to have a local government headed by the mayor and give him a lot of powers. In India, we don't really have that scenario right now. The author also says some of the cities are also showing examples of how to fight against climate change. For example, in Chennai, while India has decided to achieve net zero by 2070, Chennai specifically is hoping to meet net zero target by 2050 itself. Now, it's important because if you look at Chennai, it has a lot of industries, a lot of manufacturing, especially the automobile manufacturing happens in and around Chennai. So to that extent, for this city to achieve or to hope to achieve target by 2050 is actually commendable, which it is doing by setting an example for the other nations. Now, whenever you talk about climate change, there are two words that all of you must know and understand. Mitigation and adaptation, which is a very big debate. What should we focus on? Should we focus on mitigation? Should we focus on adaptation? So basically the difference between the two is mitigation means the efforts that you make to stop climate change from happening. Mitigation means to stop climate change, to reduce temperature from increasing further. How do you do that? By using renewable energy, by having sustainable transportation. Adaptation means accepting that now the change has already happened. We have to live with this. So build houses that are able to sustain earthquakes, build houses that are able to sustain floods, build areas which are able to sustain the droughts. This is called adaptation. Adaptation means change has happened. Now you have to live with it, make infrastructure, develop infrastructure which allows you to live with it. So basically, mitigation means to reduce emissions. Adaptation means now whatever changes had to happen have already happened. You now have to live with it. An ideal strategy is to go ahead with both, not just one. An ideal strategy is to focus on adaptation as well as mitigation as well. This is an example of the climate atlas that the author was talking about. So just to give an example, when the article says build a climate atlas, that's what he meant. Climate atlas basically means having an atlas where you have city-wise information. Like this one has city-wise information of high-intensity rainfall events, where high-intensity rainfall events have happened, specifically in which part. This is where it can get very important, it can get interesting, to make a strategy of area-wise so that you can actually act accordingly. Then from the prelims exam point of view, a couple of news stories. First, the Supreme Court has given an interesting judgment with respect to the powers of the ED under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, that is the PMLA 2002. Now, as I said earlier in the introduction, the ED Enforcement Directorate, when they take someone into detention, in many of the cases, they did not tell the ground of arrest. They did not tell why the arrest was happening. Now, as you know, under Article 22, we have the fundamental right to know the grounds of arrest, the grounds of detention. You have the right to know why are you being detained. So there was a case in the Supreme Court that ED's powers are against Article 22 because they don't tell the grounds on which the detention is happening. So they should tell it immediately. Supreme Court has said in this case that the accused will be given the copy of ground of detention within 24 hours. Means they have taken the side of ED in a sense that ED does not have to tell you immediately on the time of arrest why are you being arrested. Within 24 working hours, the ED will give you a report. This is why you are being arrested. So the Supreme Court said this is not a violation of Article 22, the fundamental right that you have. You will still be given the right, or you will still be given the information why are you being arrested, just that it will be within 24 hours rather than being on the spot. PMLA, something that remains in the news. This is the law that gives the power to the ED Enforcement Directorate to investigate financial crimes, look into money laundering cases specifically. This PMLA law is in line with the international convention which India has been supporting, like the UN Convention Against Illicit Traffic, Narcotic Drugs, the Basel Settlement Principles, recommendations of FATF, the Global Program of Action adopted by UN General Assembly. All these cases or all these offences have been covered under the PMLA Act, which gives the power to the Enforcement Directorate to undertake the actions. The last news today is that India is all set to undertake its first winter Arctic expedition. It will be undertaken by the Raman Research Institute team. Now, this is extremely interesting because this team is now expected to carry out a lot of experiments in the Arctic region. What will they do specifically? They will examine the characteristics of radio frequency environment in this Svalbard region of Arctic. This is the region where India has its own research station called Himadri. So do remember that as well. The idea is that the readings of radio frequency from this area will give us much more precise astronomy measurement so that we can unravel and unfold all the riddles about the formation of the universe that are still under question by the scientific community. Now, this will be a month-long expedition. It has been funded by the Government of India, especially by the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Again, the idea is that the team will here be using as much data they collect in the form of radio frequency to identify the signals coming in from the cosmic dawn and the epoch of reionization. So basically, this team has also built a very famous SARAS, that is shaped antenna measurement of the background radio spectrum. This is a series of experiment that this team has been carrying out in the past as well. Their objective is to identify and unravel all the details about the cosmic dawn, which is the period when the first stars and galaxies were born in the universe. This is their idea. Now, you might remember we had discussed about SARAS earlier as well. For example, just a few months back, we had discussed about the SARAS 3 radio telescope. It's a radio telescope that has been helping the scientists to discover the properties of radioluminous galaxies, which are far away, again to understand the time of the cosmic dawn. The SARAS stands for Shaped Antenna Measurement of the Background Radio Spectrum Telescope. It has been built by the Raman Research Institute, and this is deployed near the Dandagahalli Lake in the Shavati backwaters in Karnataka itself. I'll just give you a photo as well. This is the telescope, the SARAS radio telescope that we are talking about. From this part in the prelims, you do have certain questions. For example, there can be a question like SARAS 3 recently in the news is related to what? Or SARAS 3 has the following objectives, which of these is correct? Or SARAS 3, where is it exactly? Or what is it trying to study? So the answer would be cosmic dawn in such case. So make sure that you study about these from the prelim exam point of view specifically. This brings us to the end of today's discussion. Again, reminding you, tomorrow the CNA is going live at 12 p.m. and not 10. So do join us tomorrow at 12 rather than 10. From today, these are a couple of practice questions that you can write an answer to on our student answer writing portal. The link is in the description of the video. Also, as soon as the session comes to an end, go over to our Telegram channel to attend the quiz based on the topic that we have discussed here today. Thank you so much. Join us tomorrow again at 12 p.m. for the next session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.